Good evening, ladies. We had great discussion this morning in our class, and tonight this is our lesson 4 in Hebrews, already halfway through part 2. This week's lesson, we're going to begin with just a little bit of review. As we review, we think about Jesus is better than, because that's really kind of the crux of this lesson today. So in chapters 1 and 2, we saw where Jesus was better than the angels. In chapter 3, we see where Jesus was better than Moses. And then in chapter 4, Jesus is introduced as our high priest in the order of Melchizedek. And the lesson this week centered around Melchizedek, the priesthood of Aaron, and the priesthood of Jesus, and how they compare. And basically, at the end, we could come to the conclusion that Jesus is better than Melchizedek and better than Abraham. So let's look at Melchizedek. One of the first things we did this week was we did a chart on page 29, and we were asked to list what we learned from chapter 5 and chapter 7 about the Aaronic priesthood, about Melchizedek, and about Jesus, our high priest. So we're going to start with Melchizedek. We learned that Melchizedek is the king of Salem, and Salem means peace. So he was the king of Salem. He was the king of peace. He was the priest to the Most High God. He blessed Abraham. And Abraham gave him 1/10 of all his spoils. He had just come back from rescuing Lot. It goes on to say that Melchizedek is the king of righteousness. He is without father, mother, or genealogy, having no beginning of days and no end of life. Well, that sounds like Jesus, but we know from other Old Testament writings that there were those that God just took home to him. What we do know is the writer of Genesis did not give us his genealogy. Genealogy to the Jewish people was very, very important. It was important that they know who they were from, what tribe they were from. They knew that Abraham was the man. He was the very top man. So you wanted to be related to Abraham, and you wanted to be related through one of the 12 sons of Israel. And we know that Jesus was born into the tribe of Judah, and Aaron's tribe, the tribe of Levi, was considered the priesthood tribe. But here we see there's no genealogy on Melchizedek, so he was not from the tribe of Levi. In fact, it mentioned that because Abraham gave tithes to Melchizedek, that in essence, Levi also tithed to Melchizedek. So, and we talked about how the superior blesses the inferior, or the greater blesses the lesser. And so Abraham was lesser than Melchizedek. And Abraham gave honor to Melchizedek by tithing to him and recognizing that he was the priest to the Most High God. We see that Melchizedek resembled the Son of God. If you looked up that word, which I did, it means copy. So he was a copy of the Son of God. He was not the Son of God, but he was a copy of the Son of God. And that he continues as a priest forever. He is a great man. And he, as far as we know, he did not die. Now, as we compare that to the tribe of Levi and to the Aaronic priesthood, we see that Aaron was chosen by God, selected from among men. He was appointed to act on behalf of men and minister to God. He was to offer gifts for sacrifices and sins. He was to receive tithes. He was to deal gently with the ignorant and wayward. He was beset with weaknesses. He offered sacrifices for his sin as well as the sin of the people. He didn't take this honor on himself. He was appointed by God. He was a descendant of Levi, and he was a descendant of Abraham. And he taught the law to the people. And his death ended his priesthood. As we looked at the next question on the next page, on page 2, it talked about compare Jesus and Aaron's priesthood. Let me go over just a few points on Jesus' priesthood. He did not exalt himself. He was appointed by God. He's a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. We see how that is different from the Aaronic priesthood, because the Aaronic priesthood ended when the priest died. But Jesus lives forever, so his is a permanent priesthood. He is a descendant of Judah, not Levi. And we see where the writer set this up. So we see that Melchizedek was not a descendant of Abraham. And so even though Jesus is a descendant of Abraham, he is not of the he is not of the Aaronic priesthood. He's not of the tribe of Levi. Jesus is a priest by the power of an indestructible life. He lives forever. It's not based on the legal requirement concerning bodily descent. He was made a priest by the Lord. He is the guarantee of a better covenant. He holds the priesthood permanently. He lives to make intercession for us. He is holy, innocent, separated from sinners, exalted above the heavens. He offered himself once for all. And he was appointed on an oath. Aaron was not appointed on an oath. He was made perfect forever, and he saves to the uttermost those who draw near to him. So we see some differences between Aaron's priesthood and Jesus' priesthood. Aaron's priesthood ended when his life ended. Jesus' life does not end, so his is a permanent priesthood. Aaron offered sacrifices over and over again for his sin and for the sins of the people. Jesus knew no sin, yet he offered himself as the perfect sacrifice once for all. God chose Jesus with an oath. He is the son. Aaron was appointed by God through Moses. Jesus' priesthood is forever. Aaron's had an end. There were many priests in the Aaronic priesthood, but only one in Jesus' priesthood. Aaron was from the tribe of Levi. Jesus was from the tribe of Judah, which also was the tribe of kings. So he is a king priest, just as Melchizedek was a king priest. Let's see. All right, as we looked at day 3, and we've already kind of answered this question. She asked if Jesus was made like Melchizedek or if Melchizedek was made like Jesus. In verse 3, it's very clear. It says Melchizedek resembled the Son of God. So he was a copy. He wasn't the Son. And so he was... So Melchizedek was made like Jesus, not Jesus like Melchizedek. Look up the word righteousness. Sonia in our class tonight talked about how the righteousness, as you compare those verses from Isaiah and Hebrews 1 and Hebrews 7, and how righteousness is all just intertwined in those verses, how Jesus was righteous and how he had the scepter of righteousness, which means he acted in righteousness. It was part of his character, not just his actions. And how his character bought our righteousness. We talked about a little bit in 7, it talks about the need for a better covenant. And one of those, Jesus is the guarantee of a better covenant. Covenant. One of the things I found in my notes was that the old covenant had a mediator, and that mediator was Moses. But there was no guarantee that for the people's side of the covenant. Therefore, it continually failed because the people failed. But the new covenant has a co-signer, a guarantor, and on our behalf. And Jesus is the guarantee of the new covenant. Therefore, the new covenant depends on what Jesus did and not what we do. He is the surety, and we are not. His unchanging priesthood means a lasting salvation. The unchanging priesthood means that the salvation he gives is also unchanging, permanent, and secure. One of the other things that I found interesting in comparing Jesus' covenant and Aaron's covenant and Aaron's priesthood, not covenant, but Aaron's priesthood and Jesus' priesthood, was that when we went back to our lessons from our last lessons from 3 to 5, when we looked up the requirements of a priest, one of the things that jumped out at me was Exodus 28:29. One of the garments that Aaron wore when he went into the Holy of Holies, he only went in once a year, and he reminded God about his people. But Jesus lives in the Holy of Holies, and he constantly intercedes for us. What a wonderful thought when we think about our high priest and what he does for us. I hope this week was encouraging to you as it was to me. One of my favorite verses from this week was verse 25. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Even though I am weak, he is there making intercession for me. And I hope that as you continue your study, that next week we'll be looking more at chapter 8 and the new and better covenant that Jesus has made for us. This week, continue to study. Thank you, ladies, for all your hard work. And Vicki and I both so appreciate your attendance. Come, whether you have your homework done or not. We love to see you, and we know that whatever study you do, God will bless that time and draw you closer to him. Thank you, and we will finish these sessions before spring break, and then we'll start part 3 right after spring break. We love you, ladies, and we'll see you next week.